Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Nun ruhen alle Wälder, which translates to Now all the woods are sleeping. Had an interesting time trying to find this particular harmonization because although there are many different texts that have been set using the same melody by Bach, this particular harmonization I could only find under a different title called O Welt sei hier dein Leben, which we've actually already looked at one of these melodies before. This is just a different harmonization of the same melody, and this one is from the St. John Passion, which is interesting. I did some more research and found that it has a different title depending on the collection, the collection name or number that you trust. Let's see, the Breitkopf number is 62, and the BWV number is 245 for this particular harmonization, and neither of them have the same title. So there's some disagreement there, but all in all, I could not find an agreement between the text and the harmonization using the title that's listed in my anthology. But because my collection does have it labeled this way, I'm going to continue to use this title because the melody is the same across all of them. It's just a different harmonization. But we will continue to analyze. We will not let the title and the numbers stop us from continuing to analyze today. We're in the key of A major. There's definitely some interesting things to talk about in this chorale. We start on A major and we end on A major, and it's going to guide our analysis until the first cadence, which is a half cadence in the key of F sharp minor. So we're looking for a modulation point, and I reckon it's right before the cadence. We get G natural here, and that would be, even then taking us away from F sharp minor, but I think it happens in and around here. Okay, so next chord, D, D, F sharp, and A. That is a D major triad, which is a root position 4 chord in the key of A major. Then we have C sharp, D, G sharp, and B. I reckon this C sharp is a passing tone or an accented non-chord tone, and this is actually G sharp diminished over B, so 7-6. And then we have A, E, A, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad, 4-7-1. That's a progression that we would likely see in this music. Some passing tones in the upper voices, and then we have A, C sharp, and E. And one might be tempted to just continue calling this a 1 chord, but the G natural I think implies something different. I think that the chord's function is changing here from tonic to dominant of 4. They're the same triad, but once you add the 7th, which is being introduced here on the bass, the function of the chord changes. And if you could see, pardon me, if you could see after this chord, we have F sharp, A, C sharp, and D. That is in fact a 4 chord, but it's in first inversion and it's a 7 chord, so that would be 4-6-5. I also think that this is the point in which we modulate to, why did I write B? I meant to say F sharp. F sharp minor, where this would be not 4-6-5, but 6-6-5. Then on this beat, we have something very interesting as well. We have F sharp, B, B, and D, which is a B minor triad over F sharp, which would be a 4 chord in second inversion. Definitely unusual. We don't see 4 chords in second inversion at all, really. And that's, I don't think for any particular reason. It's just kind of just by circumstance of the fact that it just doesn't factor into the formula and the bass movement, but here we are. And then we have E sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and C sharp. That is a C sharp major chord in first inversion. which is 5-6 in the key of F sharp minor. Okay, next cadence is really interesting, and I won't reveal to you what kind of cadence it is until we get to it, or at least what I think the cadence to be, what I believe the cadence is. So we're going to analyze up until that point without knowing what the cadence is going to be. However, we do modulate to the key of A major, so this F sharp minor chord that happens after the 5 chord, that's definitely 1 in the key of F sharp minor, but I believe it's also 6 in the key of A major, so that's our modulation point. And then we get C sharp, E, A, and E. That is a first inversion A major triad. We have a neighbor tone in the bass. We get the same chord again. We get a passing tone in the bass. And then we get E, E, G sharp, and B. That's a root position E major chord, a 5 chord. And then we have A, E, B, and D. And I think what's happening here is Bach has a little double accented non-chord tone figure going on here, or a suspension, however you look at it. And really what's happening here is we just have another root position tonic triad. It just doesn't fully get realized until 4 and. And then we have B, E, F sharp, and A. Now here is where it's super, super interesting. Now B, E, F sharp, and A, that's just like a chordal harmony. We just have like a series of mixed fourths or fifths, and yeah, it's just kind of interesting. I think what's happening here is that we have, in the key of A major, this is definitely a 2 chord for sure. This E right here is a suspension over the bass, and instead of going down to D, we would expect this to be the same bass going into the next beat. This is what's happening here. So this is a 2-7 chord with a 4-3 suspension over the bass. But the interesting thing that happens is the bass changes here once the suspension happens, and it completely changes the trajectory of the progression. It's a very elegant and very beautiful thing that Bach does here. We have B sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and A. So this isn't a B triad anymore. This is B sharp, which is the leading tone to C sharp. And you might be able to see, well, if you're probably reading ahead, but you can kind of see what's happening here. B sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and A is now a fully diminished 7th chord. B sharp, fully diminished 7th, which is the leading tone chord of C sharp, which is our 3 in the key of A major. And then we cadence on 3. So what do we call this cadence? Have we cadenced in the key of C sharp minor? I mean, if we say that a modulation happens right here, right before the cadence, I mean, it pretty much did in the last cadence too, why couldn't it here? If we said that this was in the key of C sharp, we could just say that this was 7 and then 1, and then we can call it an imperfect authentic cadence. But what was Bach trying to do here? Well, if we redacted that sharp right here, if we just pretended that sharp didn't exist, we would have a B7 chord, and that B7 chord would just be 5 of 5, and then we would expect E afterwards, right? Because what is C sharp minor but E, because they share 2 chord tones? I mean, we get the E, we get the movement that we would expect. We have the F sharp and the A in the upper voices, and they step down to E sharp and G, which are the tonic and the third of the chord we would expect. But going up in the bass, instead of going from B up to E, we get B, B sharp, C sharp. So what I think is going on right here is actually a deceptive cadence. Because if we think about this in the key of E major, which we are in the key of A major here, I'm pretty certain, but just to illustrate the point, if we think about this in the key of E major, what we have here is something that we would expect. We would expect this right here to be, we have E major. Right now, with this suspension, we don't know the quality of the triad. We know that it is a perfect 5th with a minor 7th, which we would expect to just be 5-7. But the deception comes in on the dominant, because here is where we get 7-7 of 6, actually, and then we get 6, if we think about it in the key of E major. So we have 3 different layers of analysis here, and I think the deception comes in when we see the dominant of the chord other than what we would expect a cadence on. And I haven't encountered a cadence like this before, but my intuition is deceptive because we hear something we don't expect. And the analysis further strengthens that claim because we would expect a 5. We would expect something else. We would definitely not expect 3, but it doesn't sound like we've modulated. And really, this outline, we're cadencing on the leading tone of A major here. So the fact that it's not being part of a dominant functioning chord is very deceptive. And that's why I think a deceptive cadence is the best label for this cadence using the vocabulary we have. But right now it's hitting different angles on a couple of different styles of cadence. So I'm calling it deceptive. I think we're in the key of A major, but there are other types of analysis you could refer to it as well. I'm interested to hear your input regarding what you think this cadence is. Okay, moving forward. Our next cadence isn't as exciting. It's just a half cadence in the key of A major, so we haven't modulated, or maybe we have, depending on what type of cadence you think this is, or whether or not we've modulated. But after that F sharp chord, we get D, G, B, and E. Or sorry, this is G sharp. That is an E7 chord over D, which is 5-4-2. Just this ascending line, A, B, B sharp, C sharp, D. And then after a 5-4-2 chord, we usually expect a first inversion tonic triad, C sharp, A, E, and A, which is exactly what we get, a 1-6 chord. Alright, next we have B, D, and remember these are both natural now, B, D, F sharp, and B. Now, depending on how you look at this, you might call this a 2 chord, but I'm inclined to think that this is actually a 7-6 chord, and this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, just like how we've gotten we have the same sort of thing going on here, just from the other direction, right here. This is a G sharp diminished triad in first inversion. But you could also call this a 2 chord in root position as well. It's a passing chord that's given a lot of metric weight because it takes up a whole beat, but I think this G sharp right here is actually what's happening. And the progression makes more sense because we just get a tonic triad afterwards anyways. A, E, A, and C sharp. Oops, lost my lead there. And then we have some rhythmic mirroring going on in between the upper voices. Basically just counterpoint with the tenor as the bass holds down a steady quarter note pulse. And then on this beat, here we have a very interesting chord as well. We have D, G sharp, B, and D. And this right here, this chord, I mean, if you look on the next beat, you have D, A, and C sharp, which isn't an analyzable triad. I mean, you could imply a triad using that, but it's missing a third, and a D chord, you would need that third to really give it, to really put it into context, because a D chord would be a major triad, and it's defined by its third. But if you spell with the downbeats, you have D, G sharp, B, and D, which is a second inversion G sharp diminished chord, which is very interesting because it's not really being used in it's not really being used in a proper 6/4 context, and that's another very interesting thing as well. This G sharp diminished chord, the fact that it's in second inversion, is interesting because really what we're looking at here is the bass movement. We have 1, 4, 5, which we're getting ready for. And I apologize for my formatting, as I don't like to end phrases on the next system, only when I have to, but there's no reason why this couldn't have been in the previous system. But the bass movement, the fact that this was the chord he chose, is actually very curious. I don't know why he did that. This isn't something that's typical of his writing, but you get a very crunchy sound when you have a diminished triad right here. The fact that the predominant is another dominant is kind of interesting. But then, of course, we cadence on 5. root position, E major triad. So it makes it a half cadence. But all in all, it's really fascinating that we have this bass movement and the harmony on top of it. This chorale has been pretty rich with interesting chords so far. So, and this isn't the end of it by any means. The end of the interesting chords and the progression, anyways. So, yeah. Okay, very good. So, where are we now? If we look ahead, we have a cadence. I think it's an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp minor. But notice how we have A sharp here. Depending on how you hear it, you might have heard this as a half cadence in the key of B minor, especially because we have A sharp right here. But it's the fact that we have two A sharps in close proximity to one another is it's interesting. But I think the E sharp going to F sharp really is what solidifies the key of F sharp minor over B minor. But who knows? Maybe you'll hear it differently than I will, or than I do. So here we have E sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and C sharp. We've seen this chord before. It is a C sharp major triad over E sharp, which would be 5/6 of 6. But in the key of F sharp minor, that's just a 5/6 chord. And then we get F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A natural afterwards. There's our tonic triad. G sharp, B, E, and B. That's an E major triad in first inversion. You can call that 7/6. You can call that 5/6 of 3 as well. I've taken harmony classes where the professor was adamant about the fact that 7 really wasn't a functioning chord, and instead 7 was really just a dominant of 3. And I think it's just 6 of one and half dozen of another. They're articulating the same thing, especially because 7 wants to go to 3, so I don't really see the reason why you need one or the other, but I'll offer both because I've seen both sides of the coin. But sure enough, 3 comes afterwards. A, E, and C sharp in root position. You have some passing tones in the tenor and the soprano as well. And here we have an interesting chord, A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and E natural. That is F sharp 7 over A sharp, which would be 5/6/5 of 4. And afterwards we would get a 4 chord, B, B, F sharp, and D, which is B minor, the subdominant of F sharp minor, or the tonic if you hear this in the key of B minor. Afterwards we get B, G sharp, E sharp, and D. That's an E sharp fully diminished 7th chord over B, which is 7/4/3, because it's in second inversion. And then we cadence on F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and C sharp, a major chord. Again, with the Picardy third in the middle of the phrase. It's an interesting thing when Bach does that. And I say that again because I analyzed a chorale recently that had that in it. So I say that again. If you haven't watched the video, this is the first time in the chorale. You haven't missed anything where there's a Picardy third in a minor key. But yeah, 4/7/1 is an alternative to 2/5/1. Usually you see one or the other. They don't usually mix. Okay, moving forward, we have some type of cadence happening here. It's another interesting cadence. I think it is a half cadence in the key of A major, but it's one of those half cadences that's like, okay, we see a lot of D sharp, so are we in the key of E major or are we in the key of A major? So I'll say it might be an imperfect authentic cadence as well, but I think it's a half cadence based on how I hear it, because G sharp is still is what we cadence on, just like how we end this phrase with a G sharp here and it's ambiguous. We end a phrase here with G sharp and it's also ambiguous. So anywho, we're in the key of A major now. We have this juxtaposition between F sharp major and F sharp minor. This F sharp minor is our tonic triad in minor form, but now in the key of A major it's our 6, as similarly to how we have it going on here. There's some characteristics between the that are shared between this phrase and this phrase, so that's interesting. And there's also some, they're very similar. Actually, they're the exact same melodic fragment, just a reharmonization of it. So the fact that it's an F sharp minor makes sense. Or cadence is an F sharp minor. All right, we have a 6 chord, C sharp, A, E natural, and E. That's an A major triad over C sharp. So another 6 going to 1-6. So there's similarity between this phrase and this phrase, or how this phrase ends and how this phrase starts. Neighbor tone in the bass. C sharp, A, and E. Just some voice, or just a respelling of the chord here. Passing tone, or passing seventh more specifically in the alto. And then we have D sharp, A, F sharp, and B. That is B7 over D sharp, which is 5-6-5 of 5, because B is the dominant of E, and E is our 5, or our dominant, and we would expect 5 after that, right? But no, we actually don't. We get another deceptive progression, just like how we get up here. C, E, G sharp, E, C sharp. It's actually a 3 chord, sorry, not a 6 chord. It would be a 6 chord if we were in the key of E major, and if you hear this as E major, you might write it that way. Saying 5 of 5 going to 3 in a major key is the same thing as saying 5 going to 6 in a minor key. But we get C sharp minor here, or sorry, saying 5-6-5 of 5 going to 3 is the same as saying 5-6-5 going to 6 in the key that you would have modulated to. But yeah, I'll offer that analysis next. And this is in first inversion, of course, because it's over E. And then we have E, C sharp, F sharp, and A natural. In the key of A major, that is 6-4-2. It is a very interesting chord, a submediant 7 chord over the 7th. But because this is a half cadence, or it might even be an imperfect authentic cadence, who knows what it is. We have D sharp, B, again, very similar. B sharp and D, but here we have B natural, not B sharp. We have B, D sharp, F sharp, and A. That's 5-6-5 of 5 again. And then we cadence on 5. This sounds like A major to me, just because of the way the melody is contextualized. However, if you wanted to analyze this in the key of E major, 5-6-5 to 6, and then we would have F sharp minor 7 over E would be 2-4-2, 5-6-5, 1, depending on how you hear it. I hear this in the key of A major, and we have some interesting analysis because of it, but if you hear this in the key of E major, that would be how you would analyze it. 5-6-2-5-1. Very normal progression. In fact, I prefer the way the analysis looks in the key of the key of A major, or sorry, whoa. I prefer the way the analysis looks in the key of E major. Yeah, so moving forward, we of course end on a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A major. So with my analysis, I don't need to remodulate. If you were in the key of E, this triad afterward, or then you might look for a modulation point. So here we have C sharp, E, and E. This is an incomplete triad, so we don't know if 1 is being implied here without the root. We don't know if A is being implied here, or C sharp minor. I'm going to say C sharp minor because it's more likely a C sharp minor chord than an A chord without a root. And 5 going to 3 is sort of like a deceptive progression. Also, F sharp, A, E, and A happens afterwards. F sharp, A, E, and A is an incomplete 6 chord, right? And 3 wants to go to 6, and this would be 6-7, and it wouldn't be the first 6-7 chord we've heard up until this point. Yeah, incomplete without the 5th, that's okay. That would be the note you would omit if you were to omit a chord in a 7th chord using common practice period rules. And then 6 goes to F sharp, B, D, and B, which is depending on how you see it, I'm going to stay consistent with the way that I've analyzed it so far, which is this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and this is actually a 7 chord in root position, right? G sharp, B, D, and B, but you might call this a 2 chord in second inversion. a 2/7 chord more specifically. F sharp, B, D, and B. Sorry. It's not a 7 chord. There's no A in the chord, so it'd be 2, 6, 4. And it is part of a passing figure, so it's valid. You might see it in this context from time to time, but I think 6 going to 7 going to 1 probably makes more sense. But in a contrapuntal context, it's kind of hard to pick out the chords. But here, I don't know. It's pretty. It sounds pretty deliberate to me. And then we have A, E, C sharp, and C. There's our tonic triad. You would think a 7 chord, especially in root position, would go to 1, which it does. Then we have passing tone in the soprano. This E is a chord tone, remember, so no need to mark it. And then we have C sharp, E, A, and E. That is a root position tonic triad. Here, if we wanted to analyze it, we have some non-chord tones here. We have A, we have D, we have F, and we have D, F sharp to be more specific. So that would be a root position 4 chord in passing. So we'll go ahead and mark that. And then we have E, E, A, and C sharp. That is an A major triad in second inversion, so a 1, 6, 4 chord. And then you could see here all the voices moving down by step and the bass staying the same. E, D, G sharp, and B. That is a root position 5, 7 chord. We could put these brackets here because it's a habit. And cadence on 1, A, C sharp, E, and A. Yeah, some really interesting cadences here. I've been taking note of all the interesting cadences that we've come across up until this point. And yeah, just really fascinating to see a cadence like this and all the different ways you could analyze it. To me, it sounds deceptive, like thinking about why cadences have the labels that they have. An authentic cadence. It makes sense that authentic is, well, actually, maybe out of all of them, the authentic cadence makes the least amount of sense. Like, what makes it any more authentic than any of the other cadences? Like a final cadence or a definitive cadence. I don't know. A tonic cadence. I think there are other ways to go about doing it or labeling it, but deceptive cadence is pretty apt in terms of what it's describing. You're definitely expecting something different here. I think it is logical to say that you've modulated to C sharp minor briefly here as well, if that's the terminology you want to use, but it really sounds deceptive to me because it really does sound like this is supposed to be a half cadence, like a deceptive half cadence or a half deceptive cadence, because you would expect a 5 chord, but you're deceived. And we only talk about deceptive cadences in terms of replacing the tonic. Well, what about deceptive cadences when you replace the dominant? It's food for thought for sure. But that being said, that's today's analysis. It was, all in all, medium to medium difficult harmonic analysis, I would say. What made it really difficult was like the critical thinking that went into the two cadences that were kind of problematic. This one, which was the really interesting one, and this one right here, which was, just one of those half cadences or authentic cadences that really rode the line between what key you're in. I know with all the D sharps and stuff, it sounds like we've modulated to E, but the melody, the way that it is, it just sounds like A major to me. So there's some conflict there between what we're labeling and how we're going to go about being consistent with it. But yeah, half cadences, all in all, make things kind of confusing when you have things that, or notes that somewhat hint at the key. Okay, that was today's analysis. Thanks for watching the video, everyone. Thank you for continuing to support the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.